What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Beyond the Veil. Today, we got a really awesome guest. We have the Ghost Biker herself, Miranda Young. How you doing, Miranda?
I'm doing great, Sean. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for being on. Little side note for everybody, a little bit of Beyond the Veil for people. I messed up last time. We were supposed to record 2 weeks ago, and I seen that she was in Tennessee, and I was like, oh, that's Central Time, right? An hour behind me. Wrong. She's in Eastern Tennessee. I messed up the time zone. I felt really bad. I felt super guilty. I was, and then I was like, I'm so sorry. Let's reschedule when you can. And but here we are. Here we are. And I'm excited to hear your story. Miranda, would you like to give a formal introduction of yourself?
Sure. So my name is Miranda Young, but I'm better known as the Ghost Biker. And so I travel around the country on my motorcycle to some of the most haunted and historic locations, and I highlight them on my web series, Ghost Biker Explorations. And then I'm also co-owner of the historic Scott County Jail and historic Rugby After Dark.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And friends, if Scott County Jail sounds familiar, it's because one of our good friends of the show, Christy Sumner, is also a co-owner of Scott County Jail, and so that is pretty cool to kind of tie everything together here, and see a different perspective of everything. So before we get started and into it, how is your day?
Doing well, doing well. I'm getting ready for a big event, fundraising event that we're having in London, Kentucky. It's a Ghost Biker Explorations weekend. So I've just been doing a little bit of motorcycle maintenance and equipment maintenance for the paranormal investigation because we're doing both a ride and an investigation. So it's kind of been a hectic morning so far, trying to get all that stuff together and taken care of.
Yep, sometimes we gotta try and make the pieces fit, and then other times we have to let them just fall into place.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So this event that you're doing, and I'm assuming you're hosting. What is it? What does it entail? You said a ride and an investigation. What all is it going to entail?
Yeah, so right after the first season of Ghost Biker Explorations aired, I got Harley Davidson, the local one in Chattanooga, Tennessee, reached out to me about doing an event. And so ever since then, so I guess for like the last 5 years now, I've been partnering with different Harley Davidsons and different tourism commissions all around the country. And we tailor those events. They're typically a partnership between myself, the Harley Davidson, and usually the local tourist commission. And we pair that up with a charity. This charity that we're doing with this one is the local Shop with a Cop program. And which here in rural Appalachia is one of the things that's very, very important because sometimes that's the only type of Christmas that some of these kids get. And so we specifically tailor each of these events to the different area. And with this particular one, it's going to be a full weekend event that has a meet and greet at Harley Davidson on Saturday morning. And then it's going to be followed by an investigation on Saturday night with all the funds going to that program. This year, we're doing a really cool investigation at a local cave. So it's going to be very unique and interesting. That's going to have its own cool facets to it. And then on Sunday, we're doing a free motorcycle ride. That's going to be about a 150-mile ride that will go through some of the most historic and haunted areas in southern Kentucky.
That is awesome. That is pretty cool. So go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and sometimes the events that we do with Harley, sometimes it's just a meet and greet. Sometimes we release an episode early, and other times they're paired with a ride. So it's really each Harley is unique, and so we try to do each event as unique as well.
That's awesome, and it's cool that you get the community involvement and community outreach too. How important
Absolutely.
how important is the community outreach for you?
Oh, very, because with my show, it was really set up as a way to make people aware of some of these locations that people may not have heard of. This season, we're covering all not-for-profit museums, and that way, it works as a way to do cross promotion and cross advertisement to several different communities, if you will, the biker community, the historians, and then also the paranormal investigators. So if we can get all three of these demographics involved, we really are able to reach a much wider audience and get the word out about the different fundraisers we're doing, as well as the different event locations there in the area. It's really just kind of a different way of using paranormal tourism to really reach those different markets within the community.
Absolutely. As a veteran of the Army, I want to say that the biker community, motorcycle clubs, MCs have done immense amount of work for veterans and
Yes.
for the community, and I don't like to talk about what I don't like, but one of the things that I dislike is the stereotypes that surround MCs or
Hmm.
motorcyclists. Motorcyclists and MCs are some of the nicest, down to earth human beings that I've ever met in my life. And you watch shows like Sons of Anarchy, and it paints this different picture of MCs or cyclists. And to me, I think that stigma, I mean, obviously you've got bad apples everywhere you go,
Sure.
right? But MCs and motorcyclists, they give to their community. They do a lot of outreach. You said it yourself. Some of the more rural communities won't have a Christmas, right?
Hmm.
And MCs help provide that, and they donate food and everything like that. They're one of the more charitable, more what charitable organizations in the country.
They really are, and it's really interesting because and first off, just thank you for your service. The As far as MCs and different motorcyclists, it's really interesting because that's my number one demographic with my shows. Paranormal enthusiasts are actually my third demographic as far as what watches, and the motorcycle community. I love doing those events because not everyone is into the paranormal, but I can almost guarantee every event I do, somebody or a huge group of people will come up. At least one person within each segment there will come up and they'll tell me, hey, I may not necessarily believe in the paranormal, but let me tell you about something strange that I encountered or this really interesting place that I went to. So you may not necessarily get the paranormal, but you definitely get the supernatural and a lot of high, unusual, unexplained things that these bikers will tell you from the road. So to me, it was just a natural fit to be able to combine those passions of the paranormal, motorcycling, and also history, and put it into my series, and now actually have it as my full-time job. It was just a natural fit because they all seem to really go together.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. They really all do. Motorcyclists go across country. There's cross country rides, and it incorporates a lot of the history of the country, as well as some tourism. And so I think that's pretty cool. Like I seen last week, you were in where were you last week? I can't remember.
I was
Big
I
big
was
biker.
actually in South Dakota. Yeah, in
Yeah,
Sturgis.
Sturgis.
Sturgis and Deadwood. And it's interesting because the event that we were doing, it was for Sacred Mountain Retreats, which or Sacred Mountain Retreat Center, which does wonderful things for our first responders, veterans, and Gold Star families. It's a retreat center to where they can go. They get a free week's trip out there. It's peer based, and so they're able to work through their traumas through the puppy program, equine program, forging different metals and that sort of thing. It's a really great veteran owned program, and so all the funds that we did, we got to investigate three great locations in Deadwood, South Dakota, and of course it was a natural fit being the motorcycle mecca of the world there, to be included in that. And so we did that event, and ended up being a sold out event that we did that raised a lot of money for Sacred Mountain Retreat Centers.
Absolutely, and see, that's just one more thing that I was talking about earlier was you help facilitate a lot for the community, and for that I want to say I'm grateful and thank you for what you do and your contributions.
Thank you.
No problem, no problem. So we're gonna go ahead. We're gonna dive into it. At what point in your life did you experience something that you said, "This is odd, and I want to figure out what is happening around me"?
Well, like a lot of paranormal investigators and enthusiasts, I've been interested in it since I was a kid. I kind of come at it from a slightly different perspective than some of the other investigators that I've met. I didn't grow up in a haunted house or anything like that, but I actually come at it from a storytelling point of view with local legends and old haunts and that sort of thing. I am here in East Tennessee, grew up in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains, and grew up next to my grandmother. I spent a lot of time down at her house, and she was often sharing stories about, as we call them here in the Appalachian Mountains, haints and boogers. And so, which would essentially be the spirits and the cryptids. And so she shared a lot of stories about growing up in the early 1900s and different things that she had experienced. And then I also spent a lot of time with my dad going backroads riding, and he would be sharing stories, essentially ghosts of the past, sharing stories about some of these old towns and old ways of doing things. So once I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time in the libraries and also talking with some of the other old timers in the community, I really started gathering these stories and really grew a passion for the paranormal as well as the storytelling side of things. Now, probably my first experience would come from about the time that I was in kindergarten. Our librarian, she always made sure that all of the kids who crossed through the halls of our elementary school knew about the shooting that took place up on the second floor. And she would often share these stories around Halloween, telling us about some of the different experiences that people had had in the school. Now, here in the Appalachian Mountains, a lot of the buildings and stuff had dual purposes. And so during the 1920s, our elementary school, while it was both an elementary and a high school at the time, it also served as a movie theater on the weekends. And so one particular weekend in 1928, there was a comedy movie that was showing. It was showing to a sold out, packed out audience. And one of the local deputies had gone to actually serve a warrant to somebody who was at the theater. Well, this deputy himself was actually pretty drunk on moonshine when he went in there. And so he ended up getting into a confrontation with a local doctor that was inside there over the noise that a bunch of kids were making during this comedy movie. And so the doctor told the officer to calm down. The officer pulled out his gun and he ended up not only killing the doctor, but also killing the deputy that was serving the warrant with him. And so the doctor, or excuse me, the deputy did end up getting executed via electric chair several months later, but the hauntings from that night still held within inside that building, and you could go up there, you could still see the bullet holes in the wall where the shooting had taken place, but again, it this would have been in the 1980s when I heard about this story, and so I became real fascinated with that. And with my parents being teachers, I was often at the school after hours. And so I can remember some of us kids daring each other to go up to that room because it was closed off. It was not a classroom at that time. I can remember going up there and seeing if we could hear any of the residual laughter or the phantom gunshots or any of the disembodied voices or shadows that would often be seen up there. And so that was really where I was really started to kind of fall in love with the investigation aspect of it. We would spend a lot of time in cemeteries, going and seeing if we could make communication. But I really truly didn't start investigating proper, I guess, until just under 15 years ago, whenever I joined a team and started doing more of what you would see on television, really going into it with kind of a different perspective. But it's just always been a part of my life, especially from that storytelling side of things. Because if we don't share those stories, then the stories dies with the people who originated with them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Being somebody that grew up in like a more rural area, you hear all those stories. You hear, and where I'm from, it's called more called the backwoods stories, right? The stories the stories that you wouldn't tell at church,
Yes,
and yeah, you don't talk about that with the pastor. Um,
exactly.
and but I find it fascinating that one of the things that links the past to the present is storytelling and how that message is conveyed, right? And I I'm a storyteller myself. I love telling stories. I like listening to other people's stories because it's a way to not only connect, but it's also a way to gain experience and gain understanding from
Yes.
people. And so some of the legends and lores that we have around here have really echoed through my life, and in a way it kind of pulled me back. I left for the army in 2006, and I had zero intention of coming back and moving back home, and here I am 12 and a half, 13 years later, and I love it. I absolutely love where I'm at right now.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I was going to say that's a really good point, because I spent 21 years working as a marketing executive in marketing and graphic design, and never really thought that my full-time job would consist of storytelling and honestly maintaining a jail, to kind of see how things transitioned and to end up actually moving back to my hometown was it just goes to show you never really know where that road of life is going to take you down, and if you make a plan, just know that it's not always permanent and that things can definitely change within the blink of an eye.
absolutely. So you mentioned you were in graphic design, and you started doing that, and you worked for it. You said 20 years. Um, what was the point where you said, like, this is not what I want to do, right? Like, I'm in graphic design. This could be this is a career, but this is not what I want to do.
It's really interesting because while I was going throughout my executive career, I was doing paranormal investigating, motorcycle riding, all of that just kind of in the background, and I actually got into the paranormal as far as investigating because of my background. I had taken a job in corporate in downtown Chattanooga, and one of the HR directors he saw my background in photography, and so he was a member of a team. He had been investigating for, I think at this point in time, about 10 years, and so he reached out to me and asked if I would mind looking at some photos, and so I didn't know what type, and he really didn't give me a lot of detail until we sat down and I had already looked at a couple photos. He was really wanting me to look at those and see if I could give a logical explanation for some of the things that they had captured on an investigation. So, of course, once he gives me the photos, I'm asking all these questions. Why did you take this particular picture? What was going on? What kind of camera did you use? What was the daytime? That sort of thing. And so, he started sending me a bunch of pictures. And so after I had probably looked at 25 or 30 images, he said, "Hey, why don't you join us on an investigation?" So at this point in time, I had just been really doing cemeteries and little things, again, more from that storytelling aspect with the local legends, but I'd seen, some of the paranormal entertainment shows and such. So they invited me to investigate a local bar and marina down in Chattanooga. And so I went with these two guys. They had their tools and they ended up giving me a recorder to listen to. And I'll never forget hearing that first disembodied voice and having the flashlights and such react intelligently on command, and then going back and actually being able to listen to the audio for myself and say, "Hey, we caught these voices. There was no other females there. We caught this female voice. It wasn't me. Who could this have been?" We had really accounted for all of the light contamination, noise contamination, and such. And so really after that first investigation, I was bit by the bug at that point. And so they invited me to be a member of the team. And so throughout that time, I was going through and using my professional background with photography and design and videography and such, and putting videos out for them, as well as going through and really analyzing deeply the photos that we were taking on the investigations. And so as time progressed with the team, we were really investigating a couple times a month. We were doing at least one commercial location once a month, but we were doing a lot of residentials, which residentials are their own different beast and a whole different way of investigating. So I was spending a lot of time when I wasn't working doing these investigations. And then I was also going out on my own, riding my motorcycle, and really doing a lot of urbex or urban exploration. And so, as this was probably, I guess, about 8, 9 years into things, I was getting a lot of attention with my posts that I was doing when I was out doing urbexing and such. And so one of my friends was like, "Well, why don't you highlight what you're doing more through video?" And I was honestly riding my motorcycle to a lot of the closer investigations and such, because I found it to be a great way to get centered and grounded. And so, being marketing minded, I sat down and I thought, well, if I was going to do my own thing, how would I do this? What would it look like? And so I really put the branding together, designed my logo, designed the look of how I wanted to do it, and really realized I wanted to do it as more of a series where I would film a bunch of episodes, do the research on it, and then chronicle it uh, during the month of October, release it all on a weekly basis. And so I sat down and I kind of put it all together. Didn't really tell anyone I was doing it. Worked with one of my best friends, Josh, on filming. Filmed a couple local places that had some really interesting local legends. Kind of stepped away from the commercial side of things, but really did more of like what you might see in the books or hear some of the old timers talk about. And after the release of the first season, I ended up stepping away from the team because I just didn't have the time to commit to doing everything that I was doing for them and also doing with Ghost Biker. And then, of course, that's about the time that Harley reached out, because as soon as that first season was over, I started working on the second season. I truly, honestly didn't expect it to pick up so quickly. And we started filming for that second season, got everything planned with Harley to do an early release party, and ended up about right after that first year meeting my good friend Christy Sumner with Soul Sisters Paranormal, who you had mentioned earlier. And so we did a couple investigations together. She had been watching my show, I had been watching her videos, and we found we really had a connection when it came to the history and the storytelling side of things. The paranormal, really, with the Ghost Biker formula, we always cover the history, the travel, excuse me, and then the paranormal is really just icing on the cake. Cover the stories that are interesting enough that if we don't get any activity, it's still interesting enough to watch. Um, so we formed, we've ended up forming the company, History, Highways, and Haunts, and continued putting each of our different episodes and such out. And it was really in the back of my mind. I was spending a lot of time doing these episodes, doing my traveling, but it's kind of, when you have a really good job, it's kind of hard to walk away from that to do something totally unknown. And so in 2020, whenever everything kind of went weird and wonky, my position ended up being eliminated, and my dad had passed away, and I needed it, it was kind of an opportunity to move back closer to my mother to help take care of her. And so having that position eliminated really gave me the opportunity to kind of think outside the box. And so I was still doing the graphic design and stuff by freelance, But I did know that the jail was, it had sat vacant since 2008. I knew they had gotten the tourism grant, but I really didn't know what they were doing with it. And so once I got back, I spoke to one of our local commissioners. He said that basically they were still trying to figure out what they were going to do with it. So that's when I reached out to Chris and said, hey, in my mind, the idea I have is probably too much for one person. I just don't want to open it as a paranormal destination where people can come in. I want to do something that is enriching for the community and that also will get the history out there. So I wanted to do a true crime museum and a paranormal research center. And she was at a point in her life where she was able to say, "Hey, yeah, let's. I'm in on it. Let's do it." And so we got a plan together. I sat down, went ahead, designed the logo, went ahead and designed the look of the merchandise, and kind of set it up into a three-phase plan. And we and Chris had done so much research on paranormal tourism and the numbers. So we got with the mayor, had a meeting with him, had a meeting with the alderman, and they were all about it. And so at that point, it's like, okay, they've said yes. So now what? And
What do we
so
do?
we went in. Exactly. Got to make this happen. And so we went in, and we've been open 2 years and a month at this point, and have had over 125 teams that have come in and investigated, as well as visitors from all over the country. So it really, the process of how it went from going to this hobby to being able to do it as a full-time job was nothing I had ever really dreamed of. But I'm so thrilled and happy because I'm still able to use that marketing and design here with the business, but just able to do it on a different level. And between me and Chris, I mean, we're everything from the janitors to the executives to the tour guides. It's a lot of work, but it's very fulfilling.
Absolutely. First off, I'm gonna say what you have going on with Ghost Biker is unlike anything I've ever seen. Right? You typically, and this is for anybody who doesn't really watch the paranormal or does, but what I'm about to say rings true. You normally have those four-man teams that think every place has a demon in it, right? Or you got
Yeah.
you got two or three investigators that jump at everything and throw things out of the water. But what you got is something that is organic that people can relate to, incorporating the motorcycles and incorporating what you love into it, storytelling,
Mhm.
right? Telling the
Yeah.
history of the location, because it's something that everybody can relate to, right? We've heard these stories, but now those stories are being incorporated into the investigation. And finally, like you said, the icing on the cake, the paranormal, right? Things that
Mhm.
people experience, but sometimes don't want to talk about.
Absolutely. And the way we originally set it up, so so when I left the team, I was doing the solo investigating. And so what's interesting about it is my videographer Josh, he is not an investigator. And so originally he was just going to kind of set me up and I was going to film it vlog style. After that, he was just going to basically get some of the B-roll motorcycle shots and follow me on my first investigation there. What was cool about it was Josh had experienced things, but he had never investigated before. And so I can remember sitting there using the dowsing rods, having the flashlights and stuff, and some of the other tools, and things started going off. Things started happening, and so of course Josh is like, "Oh my gosh," while he's filming, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything," because Josh is the ultimate professional. And he's like, "Oh, I shouldn't have said anything." I was like, "No, wait, that's perfect because the fact that you're not an investigator actually it makes it very identifiable because if we were going in, it would be so different if he was an investigator." And I've had, Chris has helped me film, my friend Tiffany has helped me film before, and they're all investigators. As we're doing it, a lot of the time they want to ask questions or they want to they end up subconsciously, I guess, becoming involved. Whereas Josh, I mean, it was purely organic. It was pure reaction, and the spirits at the locations know that. And he was just a wonderful trigger item himself, or essentially ghost bait, because they really liked messing with him. And so he did end up. He helps me from time to time, but after the second season, because again, that was during 2020, and things kind of changed with his family dynamics, and so he wasn't able to travel with me. But in the early episodes, it would be solo investigating, but we made no bones about it that there was a camera guy with me and that he was not an investigator. So a lot of the people who watch the show are not investigators. They may be enthusiasts, but they're not going out and doing it every week. So he really created, I hate to use the word character, but somebody that was very identifiable because experiencing this for the first time. And the way we film and edit the episodes, you're in the episode with me. So if you're not an investigator, you're experiencing this for the first time, and the same as myself. And so I tried to carry that on throughout the seasons. Some of the episodes, it's just me. Other episodes, it is me and a camera person, which is either Tiffany or Christy, and really just keeping it small and keeping it really to that formula of picking these locations that maybe you haven't necessarily heard of, or at least that haven't been overly investigated. I mean, I love hitting the big places like Waverly Hills, Lizzie Borden, the places that everyone knows and loves, but there's just something about being able to highlight a place that people aren't aware of and being able to share some kind of interesting tidbits about the locations or the city surrounding it that may draw people to want to go and visit and check that out.
Absolutely. So, what is your favorite location that you have investigated, whether it be known or unknown to the public?
That's a tough one. I've got several actually, and for many different reasons. Probably my ultimate favorite that I investigated, I highlighted in season 3, episode 1, and that was the Grand Old Lady Hotel that was there in Balsam, North Carolina. It has been investigated several times. It's not overly investigated, but it was a very psychological haunting. My favorite horror movie is The Shining, and this hotel was very much like that, like The Shining over here on the East Coast. So it's located right in the Balsam Mountains there in Western North Carolina, and the hotel was built in 1908. It was built as a almost like a destination location that some of these early travelers that would take the train through the mountains, they would go, and it was almost a retreat that was used for healing for a lot of these folks. They would go and they'd stay for a whole summer there in the mountains. Now they kept the hotel very primitive, so out of these rooms they didn't have TVs in the rooms, and each room was designed very uniquely. And after the railroad system quit running through the town, it just didn't get the travelers like it was used to. Now, people who are coming up to hike in the mountains or just to be up there for the weekend, they would get some of those folks. But for the most part, this location would have to close down during the wintertime because the weather was so harsh. So I think they would be closed from, I want to say it was like around mid November up until April was when they would originally open up. Now, that's hard, to sustain a hotel on that when you don't have the sellouts during the summers and everything. So they did turn to allowing paranormal investigators to come in during their closed months. And again, because it wasn't a very well-known hotel, they still didn't really have a lot of investigators. But because this particular year was 2020, they were actually closed a little bit later than they would have been. I think they stayed closed till May. And so I went up, did the investigation as a collaboration investigation with Soul Sisters. I spent the first night in the hotel, and it was just myself and Christy. And then the second night, Christy's twin sister, she came and they did their investigation, and I kind of did a couple a couple sessions with them on that second night. But I ended up technically staying there the entire weekend. And there's just something about not just being in a location and being alone, but also being in a location and being so isolated where there's nobody even within, miles of where you're at. And so it was just a fun weekend. There are some stories of death that does surround the hotel, but for the most part, the people who are coming and going from this hotel, they wanted to be there. They were travelers. So I think that's really why I liked doing that one, because it was just a different type of activity. And any opportunity that I get to be able to sleep in a location, I am all about, because I always get a lot of different activity that way. That's probably my favorite location that I highlighted, my favorite investigation. The other one would have to be one, it's relatively unheard of, but it was the 1944 troop train accident. Excuse me. And that took place in it was right on the southern Kentucky, northern Tennessee border in an area known as Jellicoe. And this I actually happened to find this when I was doing a motorcycle ride. I was going out scoping out the area for a haunted motorcycle ride that I was going to host. And as I was driving up 25 West, I saw this little 8x8 sign that was hanging on a pole that said 1944 troop train accident viewing spot. So you couldn't see anything because it was so overgrown and brushy. And honestly, the mountain road, there was really nowhere to pull off. So after I finished the ride and was doing my research, I went, looked it up, and found out that it was in the top 10 troop train accidents of all time and in the top five derailments. And
Mhm.
so I thought there needs to be more recognition about this other than just a tiny sign. And so I did go back to the area, found a spot about a mile down the road that I could pull off. I hiked down to the river, and I was literally climbing down the side of this mountain past this garbage that people had thrown off, and really just trying to find a spot to get down to the river. And so basically, the gist of it is this train was hauling fresh recruits from Indiana, Illinois, Maryland. They were These recruits hadn't even been to boot camp yet, and as they're going down the tracks here, the train derails in the Jellicoe Narrows. They're not really sure why. They don't know if it was speed, if the engineer just wasn't paying attention, or what. But the train derails, and there were 43 victims of this troop train accident of these fresh recruits. And so I go down to the river, and I did this investigation during the day because I really like to be able to show that if you're doing a true investigation, activity happens day or night. I had to be selective about the tools that I used because I had a railroad track to the right, the river beside me, and the road high on the mountain to my left. So I had to use more alarming type tools.
Yep.
Um, I did get one EVP, and it was a little harder to hear, but we did capture that. And I got one really interesting response on the spirit box. And honestly, that's all it takes is just one or two simple responses. Because if you're getting a ton of responses, you have to kind of wonder, is it truly paranormal activity? But the area was flooded the day that I was down there, and so I was not able to get to the actual derailment spot. But I asked the question using the spirit box, where the accident is this where the accident happened, or can you tell me where the accident happened? And the only thing I got that entire time on the spirit box was it said waterfall. And I
Wow.
was like, well, that's interesting. And so, and because of the area I'm at, there was no service with cell
Yeah.
phones or service with radios. So I went back the very next week after the waters had receded, and I hiked down to the spot where the memorial was. The reason that that sign had been placed there was during the 80s, the Boy Scout troop had actually put a big monument up on one of the rocks. And of course, over time, it had washed away. But the fascinating thing was there was a small waterfall right there beside that monument, and we
Wow.
were able to showcase that. It was pretty incredible. And then I was able to go through at the end of the episode, and I found all the names. They did have a monument in Jellicoe that had the names of the soldiers. So I was able to find pictures and names and have that scrolling at the end to really just show it, to really humanize the spirits that we're talking to show that, hey, these were men that ended up losing their lives in a tragic way. So that's probably one of my favorite all-time episodes. I didn't get a ton of activity, but I felt the activity I did get was very rich. And just being able to share this story and then also show a slightly different way of investigating, that it's not always creepy, it's not always dark, but it is about sharing this history and getting this information out. I was really proud to be able to do that, and it's definitely probably one of my favorites.
That those two stories are amazing.
Thank you.
Pretty awesome, especially the second one. Really awesome. And what I find is that when I watch something that a creator puts out, or that a TV show puts out, you see a ton of, you see a a bunch of evidence, or an overabundance of data that's being collected, but you don't really see, like, when you go to a location, you get one or two hits on something, whether it's spirit box or EVP, like how concrete that can be, and actually, that evidence being researched further, right? Like you said,
Mhm.
you got waterfall on the spirit box, and then you actually found the waterfall, right? And
Mhm.
that's, I feel like the community should be following your steps, right? Investigating further. If you get something, right, like, continue to find that answer, because it further validates the evidence that you got.
Absolutely. I mean, because, I think we use the word investigation very, very lightly when we're doing this. And because obviously it's more of a semantic sort of thing. Ghost hunting is for more of just the enthusiasts that's going out there. Investigation is more of what we're doing when we go in. But a true investigation is not a one and done type thing. And
Yeah.
if you can go to these locations, and I say this as a commercial location owner, when you go to them, you only have a limited amount of time. That is one of the reasons why I do like some of these lesser known, more local. And when I say local, I mean local to the specific area I'm at, not where I live, but where I'm actually investigating. These legends and stories, if you can make multiple trips and go in and be able to take the data that you've gathered on your first trip, go back and utilize that in some way during an investigation, to me, that's true investigating. With what
Yeah.
we're doing at the jail, I mean, we're there up to 16 hours
Yeah.
every day. We're really blessed. We are in and out of there. We learn how the spirits that we're communicating with, when they have certain ways of communicating, it's, you kind of start to learn who you're talking to, and different triggers that will set them off and increase communication. um, that's what I try to do with some of these episodes. We don't always get to necessarily go back multiple times, but when I do have the ability to do that, to me it's something I always like to do, just because you never know. One that I covered last season, it was the first episode of season 5. I covered all haunted jails, and I investigated. It's called Ye Old Jail, but it is the old Fentress County Jail. And so I know it had been investigated by one other team, and they came back and they just said it was really pretty quiet, that there really wasn't much activity. Now, the local Chamber of Commerce in Fentress County is located in there, and those guys had some really great stories of odd things that had been happening. And so I went and investigated it 2 times, a week apart, and I took what I had gathered that first week and was able to use it on the second investigation. And really got some pretty incredible findings. It was actually kind of quiet the first week, but I started thinking about it and thinking, these two guys that have their offices set up in that jail, they they're not into the paranormal. Now, I was really lucky to get to go in there, but it was one of those situations, and you probably have heard people say this a lot. It's like, I went here, this happened, and I don't go back, you know. And so you have to think these spirits that aren't used to the communication, if somebody is going into a room and then you communicate or do something with them trying to make contact, and they're like, I don't go back in there, at least not by myself or after dark, you're probably going to be like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe what I did caused them to not want to talk to me. And so I kind of approached it with that mentality that maybe that's what's going on, and started using things really just trying to be very simple of and very mindful about the fact that we don't know what they see from their side. We don't know if they can see color when we tell them to touch the green light. We don't know if they're confused because the timing that they're in when we say, "Hey, touch this," they may think it's a candle and they may think it will burn them or what have you. So I really approached it that way. And when I came back for the second time, I kind of set it up like you would do a normal night in jail, basically, sitting there playing cards and really trying to get more EVPs because maybe they didn't know how to use the tools. And so I did find out that one of their most famous inmates was Billy Dean Anderson, who was on the FBI's most wanted list for 4 years. He was hiding out in a cave while he was in there during that 4 year time period. He had also taken paintbrushes and different art items into that cave, and he ended up doing like 300 paintings of Jesus Christ that time while he was in there. He was a phenomenal artist. So when I went in, I actually took took some paintbrushes and some artist's equipment, and I made sure not to say at any point in time what I had with me. And so I had my Ovilus 5, and then I also had my Spirit Box SB7 with me. And so whoever was in there kept saying that they wanted to play a game. And so I ended up opening the paintbrush. And so I said, I held it up and I said, I have something here for you that you may be able to identify and know. And I said, if you can tell me what this is, you can have it. And on the spirit box, it said paintbrush. And I didn't hear it at the time. I did catch it. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to have to go back and listen to that. But when you re listen, it's as clear as can be. And then it says mine. And then right after that, I go over to the cell and I still have my Ovilus going. And we're filming. And I'm like, can you tell me what this is? What I'm holding up? And it says paint. Both times. And I'm all about going and debunking my stuff. And I have no idea how clearly whoever this was, they knew and they were able to communicate through both of these different tools. And so after that, I ended up taking playing cards, and it kept saying, wanted to play a game. So I dealt out 5 cards and I said, if you can tell me, I said, if you can truly see me and you can tell me either the number, the card, the suit, the color, anything about what I'm holding up, again, you can have this. And so I ended up doing 3 hands of cards, but the very first hand, after I'd pulled up 3 cards, it didn't get it. And then finally, when I held up the fourth card, I held up a 7, and instantly I hold it up toward the camera because I can't even see what it is, and it says 7. And we were able to get them to identify 2 cards out of that whole 3 card draw of 5 cards. And so I have absolutely no explanation. I can understand sometimes, if you're using certain apps that are pulling from your phone, your data, your microphones, what have you. But when something actually can see and identify, and I don't even know what I'm about to do or hold up, that's pretty incredible. And to be able to go back that second time and take the information that I learned from that first time, I think is what really helped to make that a richer experience during that second investigation.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before we go, I wanted to ask you why why do you think that certain people that have passed away stay in the plane of existence as spirits and not everybody?
Right. Great question. Personally, for me, I think my opinion changes the more I learn on this. And for one, I kind of believe that this other realm is closer than what we think. Heaven, hell, purgatory, or just the waiting area. I think that it is closer than what we think. And sometimes these spirits are have the ability to be able to communicate whenever we're asking these questions. I think that's why, Al Capone is often in like 5,000 places,
Yeah,
and I do believe that there's a difference in the spirit and the soul. I think that there's a difference. And I think that a lot of what is here is deposited energy as well.
yeah,
Um, so I do believe that sometimes we are talking to an intelligent spirit, but really feel like it's a very sad existence if, my whole life is defined by, I'm murdered in a hotel room and my whole life of existence is trapped within this hotel room. I don't necessarily believe it's a trapped soul, if you will. I believe it's more of an energy that's deposited from an event that's happened. And the intelligent, I think, is sometimes they're just, I mean, they're on a different plane, but they're
yeah,
maybe not there.
yeah.
Um, and a lot of the time, it's really just to share and tell a story to really fill that information in for us.
Absolutely.
Excuse me.
Miranda, where can we find you at?
So you can find me under Ghost Biker Explorations on Facebook or Ghost Biker Explorations on YouTube, and then on www.ghostbikerexplorations.com. You can go back and binge the past 5 seasons, watch that anytime. Currently, the new season, season 6, is airing every Tuesday night with new episodes during the month of October. And we're doing something a little different and special this year. Each episode is actually live, so you get to investigate with me. And we are covering all museums and locations that either have only been investigated just a very couple times, if even been investigated at all, and places that you can go and visit during the day. They definitely need your support at these locations. At the end of the month, these episodes will I will download the live. I'm hoping that folks will send me the timestamps of things that they've seen. We'll give them a shout out in the produced episodes. So we'll actually be releasing double content this year.
That's
And then, of
awesome.
course, we do a live every Thursday night where we follow up from the live that we had on Tuesday night. And it's at 9 p.m. Eastern time when this drops.
Yes, Eastern time. Remember that, not Central time. Okay,
That's
don't
right.
make my
Unless you're
mistake.
in Nashville.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right, Miranda. I wanna thank you for hanging out with me and sharing your experience and sharing your story. I'm excited to see where you go with this, and excited to see further investigations. What you're doing is bringing light to locations that in some way, shape, or form have been lost in time, and you're bringing it to the light. And I think that that's very important. So I want to thank you for what you do, not just for the locations, but what you do for your community. What you do for your community cannot be thanked enough. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me, Sean.
Yeah, no problem. And everybody, I hope you guys have a nice day. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode, and thanks for hanging out with us. Much love.